Men die an average of 4 years earlier than women. And for Canadian males aged 15 to 44, suicide is the second leading cause of death. Yet, 61% of male say masculine stereotypes prevent them from seeking the health care they need.
Today we have Aanchal Vash, who is the founder of this organization, Reach Out Together, and is a certified success trainer, a certified mental health first aider, and has recently been listed as top 40 under 40 emerging leaders in social impact in Canada. We will now be covering how to support high achieving men before they break. Welcome, Aanchal. To begin with, can you please share why is this topic important to you?
I founded Reach Out Together after the passing of my twin brother, Tushar, to suicide. And Tushar was a very high-performing individual, a very charming, at that age, he was doing very well for himself. And so I'm looking forward to this discussion and creating awareness for top performers, high achieving individuals who are struggling, but either we don't notice or we don't know how to support them.
Thank you for sharing that, Angel, and thank you for being here. What are some of the most common ways high performers hide distress, and why did these signs often go unnoticed? So many high achieving men appear to be successful on the outside while quietly unraveling on the inside.
Okay, that's a great question. So there are two parts to this. Let's talk about the first part. Some of the common ways that they often hide distress, I can narrow it down to, a few points based on what I witnessed myself and based on my research. So, CAMH research shows that men often use work as an emotional distraction. And also, the American Psychology Association shows that men externalize emotions differently compared to women. So there's a reason why I'm mentioning these two research studies, because this shows us how, certain men operate, and it helps us even identify certain signs, right? Based on just their behavioral traits. So, you know, overfunctioning, overfunctioning, increasing output, taking on more responsibilities, just working longer hours. Second would be masking with competence. Um, a person that is reliable. They want to come across as a person that's reliable. Third could be irritability. So often people get very quickly irritable over the smallest of things. And that is as well one way that we can identify that this person is experiencing some sort of distress. The fourth is avoidance behavior. Often people won't return your messages, your calls, or they're just canceling plans. Um, they often, isolate themselves in the disguise of I'm busy. Again, this is another common way. Fifth is numbing through habits. For example, maybe they're excessively training, they're overworking, overuse of certain substances. For example, alcohol, you know, could be cannabis. Even gaming is another form and another way that they mask what they're experiencing. And lastly is perfectionism. When someone is setting unrealistic high expectations, they're often compensating for what they're feeling internally. So these are some six common ways that we can identify high performers are hiding the way they're feeling. Now, the next part of your question, why it goes unnoticed. I have narrowed it down to four reasons. So let's talk about gender norms, right? Men are socialized to appear strong, to appear unemotional, or to appear that they're self-reliant. So often it's the gender norms that have been placed on society. The second could be success bias. If someone is producing results, the colleagues just assume that they're fine, right? Um, Third is cultural silence. Men rarely articulate emotional distress directly. For example, saying things like, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, I've just got a lot on my plate. Culturally, men have to have it together. And so we have conditioned them to not speak up, to not express themselves. And lastly, is the invisible burnout. Early burnout, the symptoms, they mimic productivity, hyper focus, hyper independence, and just excessive work ethic. These are some common reasons why we don't notice that someone is experiencing a mental health problem or in a crisis situation.
That's really profound, Anshul. Thank you for sharing both the reasons and some common signs that we can look for. My next question is sort of exploring more around gauging risk. And you teach people how to identify early warning signs and gauge risk without clinical language. But
Yeah.
when it comes to supporting high achieving men, what specific behavioral shifts should families, workplaces, and leaders pay closer attention to?
There are 8 behavioral shifts I wish I knew before, that would indicate that someone who's a top performer or someone that's a high achiever is not doing okay. Um, Sudden withdrawal, changes in reliability, for example, missed deadlines, not showing up, forgetfulness. Third is loss of interest, just dropping hobbies, sports, just meaningful routines. The fourth is disruption, either excessive sleeping or not sleeping enough, showing up exhausted. Fifth is statements of hopelessness. And this is something that, I heard quite often, comments like, what's the point? Nothing matters anymore. This is a huge indicator that this person's not doing okay. The sixth is taking risky behavior, like perhaps reckless driving or increased use of alcohol, perhaps overspending. It could be physical symptoms, which is number 7, is like having a lot of headaches. Like my twin brother had pounding headaches, on repeat, day in and day out, and we just thought, oh, it's just a headache. We didn't know any better. At that time, I was 24. I didn't know anything about mental health education, signs and symptoms. Um, so I really wish that I had known about these earlier, because when I went through my mental health first aid course and I was studying all of this material, it was so evident to me that my twin brother was not okay and that he needed some help and support. But yeah, the last one, I would say behavioral shift, would be irritability and short fuse. Like he would get frustrated over the smallest of issues. The smallest of things would just trigger him. And so, when it comes, these are just some signs, right? Some behavioral shifts. But if someone asked me, based on these signs, if you would have noticed it, do you think you could have like helped your brother, supported him differently? I would say yes, I would be more aware that something is not right and that immediate support is required. But I would say more than the signs, what is important is gauging the level of risk. And so in mental health first aid training, they say gauge the risk by low, medium, and high. What I would say is based on the level of risk, low being green, if the risk is low, it really depends on how you approach them and how you talk to them. And we'll touch upon that shortly. Medium risk is, yeah, there is more concern here. And high risk is forget confidentiality, call or text 988 and get this person to professional help. When it's high risk, forget everything. You just want to make sure that this person is safe.
That's very useful, Anshul. Thank you for sharing. So, what are those practical strategies that colleagues, partners, or friends who want to support men can use to start a supportive, non-judgmental conversation?
First of all, mental health first aid is given to an individual that is experiencing a mental health problem or a crisis situation until professional help is available. So there is a way where we can approach an individual in distress for them to willingly actually want to receive the help. If we approach it too aggressively, with judgment, with shame, people will go inward and they would not want to receive or do anything about it, right? They'll probably shut you down. And so this is something that, I talk about all the time. We teach that here at Reach Out Together, which is the LUR methodology. It's a mental health first aid protocol to support someone that's not doing very well. It starts with listening. Listen non-judgmentally, inquire and ask questions to gauge what they're feeling. Ask questions, right? In the second phase is, and the third is understand the problem, understand where they're coming from. The fourth is respond appropriately, like respond with care. And then lastly, you always want to encourage professional help and other supports. Now, I know that we're quickly going through this because we don't have enough time here, but I do want to shed some light on certain ways of how you can approach the conversation with compassion. So here are some practical communication tools that are mental health first aid informed. You can use these sentences, like save them somewhere, and when need be, approach someone, using any of these conversations. So you can say something like, I've noticed you've been quieter lately, and I care about you. How are you really doing? That's number one. Number two, you can start the conversation by saying, you've been carrying a lot. I'm here if you want to talk, but no pressure. I'm here. Third, you can say something like, I'm not here to fix anything. I just want to understand what this feels like for you. And lastly, you can say something like, you don't have to hold everything alone. I'm in your corner. So these are some statements that you could use when you're asking the right questions to open that person up, right? Quite often, people, when they approach someone trying to support them, they will use comments like, oh, I know what you've been through. I've been there. Oh, you know what? I know someone that went through this as well. These are statements that you should absolutely avoid, because for that person that's struggling, you are minimizing their experience and what they're feeling by saying statements like that, right? And they're not going to listen to you. So the first step is, in the mental health first aid protocol, is listen, and listen non-judgmentally. This is where you do not say anything, but you listen. And after that is when you inquire, you're asking them appropriate questions, you're creating a safe space for them. That's about them, about what they're feeling. So this is where these statements would really make them feel supported and heard.
You've shared some really useful tools. Thank you, Anshul, for shedding light on how to support men and their mental health. As a wrap-up question, I'd love to know, what do you wish more leaders understood about mental health risk in top performers?
What I wish more leaders understood about mental health in top performers is that high performers break quietly, not loudly. Why? Because they often reach crisis without showing obvious signs, right? They're top performers. They don't want anyone to know. They don't want anyone to know that they're struggling. High achievers, top performers, the strongest of employees are often the most isolated because asking for help feels like failure. So, as leaders, as managers, it's important to initiate check ins. Creating psychological safety within an organization is a performance strategy. It's not just a wellness perk.
So powerful. Thank you for your time, Anshul.
You. All right, so now we're moving on to our next speaker, Mr. Neil Seeman, who is a public health researcher, founding editorial board member of National Post, a columnist for the Toronto Star and Healthcare Quarterly. Today, we will be uncovering why men often experience high stress and depression yet avoid professional help. Welcome, Mr. Neil.
Thank you, Aanchal. It's a great pleasure to see you again and be with you. Thank you.
Oh, it's such an honor. Thank you for making time to talk about this important topic. To begin with, can you please share what makes you well versed to speak on this topic?
Well, thank you, Anshel. I don't like to think of myself as an authority or expert. Really, I'm someone since the beginning of the commercial web, has been tinkering around, looking at conversations online, and now for 30, 30 odd years, and having started a company, really tracking conversations and looking at how men versus women seek help online, talk about mental health online, talk about stigmatized topics online around the world, and have published on this, written several books in relation to this on different themes. And it's given me a window into just hundreds of thousands of data points on this topic.
Beautiful. Well, we really appreciate you being here today with us. I know that you've written extensively about masculine norms and how they shape help-seeking behavior. In your experience, what are the most harmful expectations placed on men today? And how are these expectations directly contributing to rising stress, burnout, and depression?
Well, thank you, Anchal. In the interest of speaking what I mean, I'm actually not going to do a typical masculine norm, which is just to pretend as if I have all the answers at my fingertips. And I'll just refer to some notes that I collated from colleagues in the field to answer that question, looking at a range of research. And so there's a number of norms contributing to stress, burnout, and depression. And I'll list some of them that are synthesized in the research. You know, there's what we often call the figuring it out alone mandate. Men internalize that asking for questions, it helps equal incompetence. The emotional range restriction you often hear about, acceptable emotions versus unacceptable emotions. Men can be stoic, supposedly angry and humorous, but unacceptable fear, sadness. Physical invincibility myth, the provider myth, the idea that your provider identity is your sole identity, the concept of competition over connection, risk taking as a masculine proxy is a dangerous norm. We have new data out today from Mental Health Research Canada showing that 9.1% of Canadians are dealing with gambling addiction, and this is preponderantly among young men. So why is that? And we're as a community of researchers, we're starting to investigate that. And then there are specific modern amplifiers that we're all familiar with. Of course, social media, chest thumping about accomplishments, economic precarity. There's a loneliness epidemic among men. The earliest research on this is out of England, but also elsewhere, showing that men really only have sometimes just a few, two, one, if that, friends, that sense of connectedness where they can talk about emotions or feelings. There's fatherhood role confusion in terms of trying to be present and, of course, be the provider. There's digital addiction, of course, on the gambling side that I mentioned, but a number of other digital risks. And then there's just, the direct contribution data, right? Men are at 3 times more likely to die by suicide than women, but they're less likely to seek help. However, in the online context, they're actually equally likely to seek help. So that's quite interesting. And depression in men sort of manifests itself differently than in women, and burnout, the grinding, the hustle, especially men entrepreneurs that I've written and spoken about. And then problem gambling, as I referred to earlier, has the highest suicide rates of any mental health condition.
With all these expectations that men, would you say they place it on themselves, or would you say they're conditioned?
Well, we have thousands of years predating us that condition us to these norms, and the neuronal framework within our brain that tells us what's normal and what's not. I think it's a mix of both environment and norms. Um, and so I don't really know the answer to that question entirely. I think it's a mix of both. What proportion, I don't know.
And how would you say, Neil, that just from your, lived experience so far, I know that you mentioned that a lot of men are isolated or they're lonely, especially men as they, grow older. How can we identify certain signs or symptoms that someone is not doing okay?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is a really important question, and this is what I've canvassed my male colleagues in my community who think and talk about these. So there's family dynamics and there's workplace dynamics that are often missed. And I confess in my own life, I've missed signs of coworkers, and I feel very badly about that, terribly. In the context of the families, some data that come up relate to withdrawal from usual activities like going to the gym, reading, whatever they may do for hobbies, an irritability spike, sleep appetite changes, physical complaints without a clear cause, workaholism, complete disengagement, a sudden increase in risk-taking activity, certainly increased gambling activity, which we're seeing more and more, relationship withdrawal, substance use changes in the workplace. This is an area where we do miss a lot because men are more reticent to talk about their feelings. There's performance changes, of course, with missed deadlines and such. There's personality shifts. You often see someone who's usually collaborative and then all of a sudden isolated. Gambling talk or behavior, that's a clear sign. Cynicism or hopelessness. And then how do we gauge that risk? I often like to think of it in terms of a green, amber, and red urgency warning framework. So green, you have one or two signs. You might have a recent honest onset. Maybe the person acknowledges stress. That's okay. You just monitor it. Yellow, sometimes that can be a good sign. Yellow, there's multiple signs. It's lasting for weeks. It's clearly affecting work and relationships. They're very dismissive of others and isolating. And then, of course, there's red urgent actions when they're vocally talking about suicidation or deep, deep hopelessness. And this is where the red alarm warnings come in.
Wow, that's really well articulated. Thank you for sharing that. Um, So, a lot of times we've noticed that men who are even aware that they're struggling are not very inclined to going and seeking help.
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on that? And how can we as a community better support them?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it comes down to how we engage and ask questions, and then how we think about communicating what therapy or coaching is all about. So, what you don't want to do is say, "Okay, man up," right? Or "What's wrong with you?" or be dismissive. But what does work tends to be questions around leading with specific observations using the I word. I've noticed that you've missed XYZ nights playing hockey or engaging in other activities. What's going on? Being very specific, using those I statements, normalizing the struggle. I think like the reality is, hey, just opening a conversation. A lot of guys are going through really difficult financial times right now. Businesses, shops are going under, and then that just opens up that conversation. And then kind of activity-based conversation often works really well. Walk and talks, physical. Then when you're talking about therapy, I think what men do understand is coaching and performance. So hey, okay, imagine if your business colleagues needed coaching and performance around sales, you would normally get in somebody to coach them on that. But what if it's your body talking? What if it's your brain that's not functioning to its highest capacity? Same thing. That's how we need to think about therapy. So I think we're okay with sort of performance and coaching, but we need to normalize the therapy language in the context of men.
That's very true. And also, like, when I remember when went for my first therapy session, which was, I think, like 8 years ago, I learned something very interesting. The therapist told me that about 75% of her clientele wasn't per se people that, identified as something being wrong with them, but they were more executives, C-level executives and entrepreneurs that just wanted to keep going and have the right tools. Because, life without struggle is like a car without wheels, it doesn't really exist. So that was really, really interesting to learn from a therapist that, it's not per se that's something wrong with you. It's more to avoid and to prevent it from potentially getting there, from prevent a crisis from occurring. Um, Mr. Neil, what would you say one thing that you wish your friends or family did differently when you're struggling or when you were struggling?
Yeah, I think um I think for men and for women, the one trait that we admire the most in others is vulnerability. And it really encourages us to connect and reach out. And yet we see that as a scarlet letter for ourselves. So I think the invitation to be vulnerable helps others around you be vulnerable. And so that's what I would encourage people to do because we're in an age, right, of inauthentic digital communications and AI for all its wonders. But we crave that authenticity more and more and vulnerability that comes around with it. So I'd encourage people to be vulnerable, to and to use humor. I was in an environment the other day, and there were two graduate students who were talking about how intimidated they were in a particular context. And I brought over a colleague of mine, and we joked about how we weren't sure, but we thought it was Groucho Marx who said, you know the truth is that nobody knows anything. And we just started all uproariously laughing in the sense that we're all just kind of muddling through and trying to figure it out. And we're all equal of moral stature. So these are the kinds of discussions and laughter I think we need to have while invoking authenticity and vulnerability.
That was really well said. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Mr. Neil. We really, really appreciate it. Though 15 minutes is not enough, we will definitely bring you back to further this discussion. But thank you very much for reaching out together for better mental health.
Thank you. Thank you, Anshel. I'm so grateful for this time together. You're a leader, and I appreciate your leadership in this regard. So many people have been inspired by you. Thank you.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. All right. So now we're moving on to our next speaker, Harold Ma, who is a cancer survivor, a mixed martial artist, a former event and film manager at City of Toronto. Harold here to me is Crew Harold. He's also an instructor at Elite Martial Arts, and that's where I had the privilege of being mentored by him. He's my trainer. He has inspired many. Um, and when I learned about his journey, from cancer survivor to a cancer strong man, I was very intrigued about his recovery and how martial arts has powered that process. So, welcome today, Crew Harold. How are you?
I am fine. Thank you so much. I am
It's
humbled to be your guest.
it's such a privilege and honor that you have joined us today to talk about this topic. Just to get started, could you share a bit about your journey?
My journey, I mean, it's been almost 10 years, which is very happy to say because the 10 years is like one of the best things you can have happen as a cancer patient, former cancer patient, that when you've reached your 10 years, the chance of your survival is 100% pretty well. So my journey started back in around right before Christmas of 2015, when I was sadly misdiagnosed 3 to 4 times for a blocked tear duct in my left orbital bone. Okay. And so finally, I was able to get surgery to have it all cleaned out and fixed. And then when I had my day surgery, the doctor at that time, my ophthalmologist, he said to me, he goes, okay, we've cleaned out what we could, but we found something that we're not sure what it is. But you
Mhm.
hear by the tone of his voice that it probably wasn't something great. But of course, he couldn't confirm it because he couldn't test for it. I mean, he was going to test for it, but he can't say what he thought until the test confirmed it. So this is like December 16th of 2015. And of course, everybody goes on holidays at Christmas time. So I actually didn't get my diagnosis till like January 4th of 2016. So I had to wait almost 2 weeks, not knowing what was going to happen. So, you go about your work, you go about doing everything you do. But at that time, I was like the event planner for the city of Toronto. So I had to put on like one of those crazy New Year's Eve shows down at City Hall. So we had like 250,000 people come down. But in the back of your mind, you're sort of thinking like, okay, I'm probably going to get some news on January the 4th. And then when the news came, it was confirmed that it was a tumor that was actually growing, not an infection.
Wow. And how was, if you don't mind me asking, how was your response to that when you heard this news?
I mean, we kind of had 2 weeks to sort of ponder like what it probably was.
Yeah.
So actually was determined what it was. It was surprising, but not as surprising as them telling you the next day or telling you the day of when they did that surgery uh, back in uh, back in December. So here we are, January 4th of 2016, and they've told me, and you're in shock. Uh, I didn't ask those questions. I know a lot of people ask this when they get told they have diagnosed with cancer. Like, what are my chances? I never asked those types of questions. My brain was more based upon, oh, well, that's interesting. How is this going to impact my training? Like, it was, and it was more about the future. I was thinking, okay, never in my mind did I ever say I was going to live. Never in my mind did I say I was going to die. I just said, okay, probably will have to have surgery coming up, and how will I just deal with the surgery and post surgery? What happens in my life after that?
And did you at that point, like, did you share that with your immediate community, about your diagnosis and how was the response from them?
Oh, that's a really good question. Uh, so I guess there were two communities to talk to. There was your work life community, and then I guess your friends slash what you do outside of work. So I sort of held back a bit on the work one just for about a week because I knew there was going to be a bunch of upcoming tests to do, and I didn't know really what to tell them because I know that once you tell your workplace, it really does spread and it sort of goes like wildfire. Uh, Within the community of friends, told them within the whole martial arts thing, people knew something was going on because the surgery had me have stitches in my eye already. So I was limited to what I could do. So people knew something was going on. And I didn't really probably come out more to like a week to 10 days after and start to let more people know. Because because we were just trying to figure out what's happening. We didn't really know the extent. And when I mean trying to determine more, it's not a bad thing. It's just once you're in, I know a lot of people complain about the medical system, but once you're in the medical system, it's actually you're in the system, and the system really does look after you. So when I was determined I had cancer in that area, I had to go see a specialist because they thought it might have gone into the brain. So fortunately, you got into CT scans, and they said no, it's not in the brain. It's very localized in one area. So I didn't. So then I got switched to another surgeon who specialized in head and neck surgeries, and then I went in there, and then we started formulating the plan from there, and pretty well anything he ordered for tests, for like from biopsies to like a MRI, it was done within like 3 or 4 days. Because I also think it's based upon it wasn't it wasn't that it was like super serious in terms of like, oh my God, he's going to die or something. It was more based upon the fact that the location of the tumor was in a very bad spot,
Mhm.
and getting to it, they didn't know how deep it was. So all these tests had to determine like the extent of the surgery that was going to be required.
You're one of those individuals, Crew Harold, that always has the best attitude in life.
Thank you.
Like people would not even guess like what you've been through. Um, During that phase of your diagnosis and post-treatment, was the community like supportive? Was the community showing up? Did that impact your well-being at that time? And if so, what were certain things you did? Like, were you aware that it was impacting your well-being? And what were certain practices that you put in place to maintain that kind of mindset that you have?
Sure. So the community was definitely encouraging, like lots of positive words, lots of positive messages. For me personally, I'm whether it's good or bad, I'm a self-driven, self-motivated person. So I didn't really need anyone to train with me. Like I could show you my training logs at that time, and I was still working out within limits of what I could do. And really, the only thing I couldn't do was just get punched in the face because of stitches in my face. And so, like, I just kept training until that day when I had to go into the surgical room. Like, I guess my schedule really didn't change much, other than the types of things I could do, but the actual training didn't change at all at that time. And then when I told people I had what I had, people said, "Oh, are you okay to train?" I said, "Well, yeah, I'm standing here. I'm not dead." And so, like, let's train. So, I mean, people were like overcautious, but they really didn't need to be overcautious because I could still do everything. It was very localized, fortunately. It was just in the eye area, my left eye. I wasn't sad. I can tell you that for sure. I was
And
never,
that's what separates you from, so many people out there. And that's really why you're the one that's even here today because of the way you carry yourself, your mindset. How did you develop that, Crew Herald?
I guess through my father, maybe. He was a jokester, but I guess so. I mean, I don't really know. I think it's something that you have, but like I know we had sort of talked about attitude prior, but I never, and I've seen this with friends or loved ones that have gone through similar experiences, is that I believe that if you go in or you start the process super negative, or just feel like the whole world is fighting on, like, the whole world is against you, your experience from the moment you have whatever happens to you to how you recover will impact you. So, and I also didn't want to bring people down with me. Like, if I'm this awful, disgruntled person, really angry, it's the people that are there to support you, it's going to be very hard for them to support you as well too, because you're so angry. And I know I never had that. I remember coming into that 6:30 in the morning, the day I was getting my surgery, and the nurses said to my wife, they said, "Oh, he's going to be a handful because we can tell he's got too much energy, and when he's done his surgery, we're going to have to tie him down." Right? He said, "No, no, no. He's really good at adjusting," and it worked. Like when it was a recovery time. So my surgery was 9 hours. So I spent 9 hours in the room. I mean, you don't know what 9 hours is because you're sort of going through it. So my surgery was 9 hours, and then when I came out, other than sort of being in post recovery along those lines, like I said earlier, I didn't really suffer a lot of pain, just because of where they removed the tumor. Uh,
Hmm.
the one thing I recall was the doctor had said to me, if we need to remove bone from your orbital bone, where do you want us to take the bone from? And I said, my arm, right? Like, okay, I'm cool with that. Take it off my arm. So, I'm lying there, I'm waking up. And, so the first thing I do when I wake up is you sort of look at the sky, say, okay, I'm alive, I'm not dead. And I started wiggling my hands because I figured, okay, it's going to hurt a lot. And it didn't. So I didn't really have any pain in my arms. And then when I saw my surgeon the next day, I said, "Excuse me, but you were going to remove bone from my one of my arms." And he just said, "No, we had to take out more bone than we expected." So he built me a titanium plate instead, which is actually better than removing bone, because that once again helped the recovery, because I didn't have to worry about an arm healing if
Yeah,
in the case of them removing actual bone.
yeah. And you mentioned earlier, Crew, that even during your diagnosis, you were still training.
Yes.
And did that, like, after post surgery, how was your transition back into training? And
Yeah.
how, like, would you say that powered your recovery and
Yes.
made it more efficient, quicker?
Yeah. First of all, I'm a big believer. It doesn't matter, like, if it's because of my surgery or any injury to any athlete. I've always been a big believer in active recovery. So, if you hurt your ankle, I get it. But, you know, if it's not broken, you can still walk. You can still walk in it. You're not going to be surfing the couch, because if you're a couch surfer, the blood doesn't move and nothing, and it just stops and shortens your time to recover. So, in my case, I spent I spent about 6 days in the hospital. I got out early because they said I recovered so fast. So I was very happy about that. And I actually didn't have a problem staying in the hospital. Some people like just want to get out of the hospital. I just said they'll let me out when I'm ready. But they said, yeah, you can just get lost, because like we got so another thing you learn is that when you have nothing plugged into you, like no tubes, no machines, you're actually considered recovered. And I got rid of that stuff like within like 2 or 3 days. And the only reason I didn't get out earlier was because the doctor that needed to sign off wasn't available. So that's fine. I just spent another night. And then so it's like 6 days in the hospital, and I got home. But I was pretty, like, I looked like a train wreck because there was like 300 stitches throughout my face internally. My skin was all twisted because that was the type for the recovery process. So I was kind of limited to what I could do. And then I spent another 6 days. So in total, I couldn't work out for like 12 days, which is like a record. And on the 12th day, I said, I'm going to start walking. And that started my process back. And
Mm.
then walking became walking and cycling, and then just slowly. And then about a month later, I was back in Muay Thai class.
A month later.
Yeah, it was a month
I
later.
hope it was with the headgear.
No. Everybody knew they couldn't punch me in the face.
Okay.
And then the best part was, I think you'll enjoy this because you live downtown. So surgery, and then once you have your surgery, I knew I was in for radiation. They were going to give me radiation, and which is fine. And it took like you said, but you got to wait for a month before you get radiation. I went, okay, great. But I had actually started before radiation started. I had actually gone back to class and was teaching classes and fairly active, but not like full on active, but pretty active. And then, so when you go so I had 33 rounds of radiation down at Princess Margaret Hospital. But the gym I was training at the time was within walking distance of Princess Margaret Hospital. So it's perfect. So when you book yourselves for radiation, you can they give you the ability to ask, what do you prefer, mornings or afternoons? And I would say, oh, I want an afternoon around 3:00, 3:30. And so this went on for a week, and then they check with you every week. And I said, oh yeah, same thing. And and the person doing it asked me finally, they said, excuse me, but you're the only person that asked for 3:00 time, because everybody usually wants to come first thing in the morning, get it done, and then off they go. And I told them, I said, well, it's because I train at like 4:30, so I can come here, get my radiation, and go train. And they're looking at me and they're going like, what do you mean train? I said, and I explained to them what I did, and then they sort of looked at me like in shock and awe, like they couldn't believe I would do that. I said, well, you guys have told me that you're supposed to try to get back to your normal life, and this is what I'm doing. I'm using you as my time that I get radiation because I know I have to get it, but I like to train, so I would go after. And then so this went on for like 6 weeks, to the point where like my personal training kept getting better and better. So I started bringing more gear, and I remember I'd sometimes show up into the waiting room, and I'd have like my boxing gloves hanging off the back of my bag, and it was pretty funny because the other patients would kind of look at you like, what the hell are you doing here? Like, why do you have boxing gloves? Why is your face so ripped apart? But you're in here getting radiation. So I used that as part of my catalyst to keep training. It worked out well for me. And my radiation didn't hurt, other than it sort of burnt my skin. So that training, and I always say this, part of my recovery was being able to continue training, maybe not at 100% in respect to what I could do, but I was training at like 80%, and that was great.
Wow, like that that's very inspiring.
Thank you.
Um, so the community was supportive, and your outlook towards life or towards that incident also was, extremely positive. Like you said, going into the surgery, there's a certain mindset that is recommended to have, that can aid that process of, physical recovery. And post-surgery, it was your training, you kept up with it, which was,
Mhm.
again, I think absolutely remarkable that it was your self-talk to yourself that made you continue to take those steps, right?
Yeah.
Towards mental health recovery as well. What would you say, Crew Harold, to someone out there that perhaps has gone through a similar experience as you, but is struggling, is not able to get themselves out of bed or feeling motivated to take care of themselves?
My greatest suggestion is that you have to have some form of a focal point. And it doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It can be, every day I am going to wake up, and at 4:00 I'm going to do a crossword puzzle. But they have to have a goal, because you're suffering of whatever you're suffering from, but you need to still have some positive outlooks and things for you to do throughout the day. It could be taking your partner out for lunch every day. It just needs to be something, and everybody's something is different. So my power was physicality and having support, but to somebody else it could be, like I said, crossword puzzles, stamp collecting, coin collecting, order something new from Amazon every day, whatever works. But you can't sit in a dark space just feeling bad for yourself. It's never going to work. You have to come out of your hole. You have to reach up, and you need something, and you need something that comes from your heart. It doesn't come from someone else's heart. It's not me telling you what it is. It's you telling yourself what it is.
That's really well said. Thank you. And my last question to wrap this up, because we're running out of time here, but I would love to hear your perspective on how can the community around them support them better?
Well, once again, and as a person that's gone through it, and I know everyone says it, but it's hard to do. You need to listen rather than tell. You need to listen to that person of what they need. You don't tell them what they need. You give them ideas on what they need. You give them suggestions. But this is not like a law enforcement moment where you're telling someone you need to do this. You're suggesting things for them to do. And hopefully your suggestions lead them to a space that they find something that they want to do with your great suggestions. Because me telling you to do something never will work in the long term.
Mhm.
But me suggesting something that, hey, why don't you try this? And then all of a sudden they realize they really enjoy it, and this is something they want to chase or do. And I think that lesson is big in life, and I also think that lesson is really big when a person sort of went through what I did. But I also know that there's a lot of people that have got a lot worse than what I went through, and I was very fortunate. But I was, like I said, dropping back, I was sort of self-driven, self-motivated to do what I did. But if that isn't, then just give them suggestions, but just don't tell them, because it's only going to get them to turn off of you. Like if you keep telling someone you should be doing this, you should be doing this, you should be doing this, eventually that person who's struggling already isn't just going to struggle. They're going to start drowning, because now they don't even want you to be part of their life. And it goes
Yeah.
back to my own personal theory about life hours now. I think I think when you're diagnosed with whatever you get diagnosed with, people go, "What am I going to do with my life?" I don't see it as what am I going to do with my life. I see it as what am I going to do with my life hours that I have left.
Mhm.
Do I want to spend it with this person? Do I not want to spend it? Who do I want to phone? Who do I want to speak to? Who do I want to listen to? I think that's more important. That would be my suggestion.
That was absolutely incredible, Crew Harold. Thank you very much for your time today, for
Thank
coming
you.
out and sharing this very important message. I know that I'm right now feeling very inspired, and I'm in awe. I'm in awe of your journey and very grateful that I could cross paths with you.
Well, me to you, because I see you doing all your incredible stuff as well too.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
At Reach Out Together, we are extremely grateful for people who have taken the time to tune in. If you have enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to our YouTube channel for more mental health tips and strategies. Until then, let's continue to reach out together for better mental health for all.